meeting. It is July 10th, 2019, and this is a meeting of Montague's Finance Committee. We have a quorum here. We are being recorded and broadcast by MCC TV. Does anyone intend to record other than them? Hearing and seeing none, we will proceed. We have the minutes of our last meeting to approve, June 12th, and in looking at them, as I sat down, I realized there is a revision indicated in here. If you look at your packet, there is a...
Actually, the page 4 was just to show the changes that Mike Naughton had emailed, because we were supposed to bring the changes to the meeting tonight.
So there's it's a fairly clear indication of what he has proposed should change. It's reasonably innocuous.
Yeah, less arduous, and maybe time consuming.
I had a couple of small changes. They were so small, I'm not sure that they merit attention. On page 3 of 5, last paragraph before, the second last paragraph, the last line says may need to be more clearly delineated. It's separated, I think. I thought it might be a better word with that. It's,
Where are you seeing that, John? Page 3 of 5?
page 3 of 5.
Last paragraph?
Second paragraph.
Oh, second.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine.
And higher up on the page, the third paragraph, it says, for instance, by having staggered due dates and so forth. In the third line, I think special article requests probably would be worth putting in there. Are there other suggestions of improvements?
I had one typo on the page 5 of 5, under topics not included, it's the second sentence, it says Kate Spears, and I think it's just good to say that it appears.
Ah,
The Spears are so much more interesting.
What was that again?
appears.
Oh,
Well, any other suggestions anyone has?
I don't look at it that close. But, yeah, that's good.
Would someone care to move what we do with this?
I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the June 12th, 2019 meeting with the edits that have been made both by Mike and those involved. Close enough?
second.
Second. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very well. The next thing we have is reserve fund transfer for the town clerk.
She actually was called away in an appointment, so she's not going to be here, but I can probably answer any questions that you have.
The description that we have in the request is reasonably extensive. Simply indicates that there's unplanned retirement, and in addition to the usual vacation and sick issues, the replacement is actually earning a higher salary than the outgoing assistant clerk. I had a question on that. You mentioned that according to the labor contract,
The new employee was already at a higher grade, so when she went to the new position, she ended up being at a higher step than the previous incumbent, because she wasn't, obviously, you don't give people a pay cut if they change jobs.
so what will happen then is she will simply max out a year
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
Okay.
So that will that increase the budget for next year for?
It's already been incorporated in
It's
the
already
two
been-
thousand twenty budget.
Okay.
It's just a FY19 issue then.
So, if I'm reading this right, the present balance is already negative 37?
That particular line item is in the negative, but there's some money elsewhere, so she only needs the 22.
So she only needs a 22, so
Right.
we're not worried about that? It's
Right.
Still, okay.
Um,
And then, I guess there was that, and then the mailings.
Right, that was another unexpected cost when she decided to change the polling stations and reduce by one.
So this is vacation and sick buyout, an increase in salary, and the mailings.
Yeah, this is kind of like the big
Yeah.
things that were,
Okay.
because obviously she had hoped to incorporate the rest within the budget, but those other things kind of.
Gotcha.
Other questions or comments? I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second?
No further discussion, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This comes back to you before I forget. The next item was, my suggestion to come on the agenda. It may be a little premature in some ways, but the discretionary accounts, often mixed, reviews, both on our committee and town meeting. The sewer and the public works ones are the older ones of the two, and the larger ones, police and information technology are more recent. And the question is whether the amounts we've been appropriating special articles ought to be simply folded into the regular budget.
I have some updates on that if I may.
Yes.
Excuse me. First of all, Mr. McDonald has already decided that he's not going to ask for a discretionary account again. He's just gonna roll that into his operating budget. He felt that it was just much more bother than it was worth for him.
Okay.
In my case for the IT budget, I'm happy to actually roll that into the budget now. The file server is being purchased this fiscal year, so there's gonna be a few years before we have another one, and if people would prefer to just have that in the operating budget, I have no problem with giving up the discretionary account. And as far as the police, I haven't spoken to Chief Williams, but I did go back and review the actual expenditures out of the police discretionary account for the last 10 years or so. Well, not quite 10 years, because we didn't have one until fiscal 12. And it looks like there were only 3 instances where there was an individual purchase over $5,000 that would have made it capital. One of them was for a radar speed trailer. And the other, I think there were 2 instances where that account was used to make up the difference for what was needed for a vehicle. Either the appropriation was inadequate, or it was a case that there was an accident and the replacement vehicle cost more than the insurance reimbursement amount. Which
Sure.
typically would be something that you could do through a reserve fund transfer if that were to happen
Yeah,
again.
right.
Carolyn,
Yes.
in your line items, you would have enough money to cover what the discretionary funds have covered in the past?
Not now, but right now we have the discretionary account set up for 20 anyway, so this would only affect fiscal 21.
Right, but
And-
would you have
and-
enough money in?
Well, no, we
We do an increase.
Yes, we would just
Increase
move the
those line
appropriation,
items, right,
yes,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Carolyn, for the IT budget, would you recommend that we increase the amount in the reserve fund?
Probably not, because I think the reserve fund, I think the way the budgets have been going the last couple of years, I don't think it's gonna be an issue. And if it were, we would probably know about it early enough in the year that you could do a supplemental appropriation at a fall or spring town meeting to replace the reserve fund if you needed to.
Once every 3 or 4 years, we have to increase it, maybe not even that often.
Yeah, we increased it a while back, because it was 50 for a very, very long time. And then we've increased it to 16. I think there've been 2 or 3 years that I can recall in my 20-plus years that we've had to get more money for the reserve fund, and that was usually when there was a really big, usually a DPW incident where they just needed a lot of money really quick.
Yeah, the police say is seldom needed and would be covered by a reserve fund. This is.
And again, I haven't spoken to Chief Williams about that particularly, but
I guess it does make sense. If he's not using it on a regular basis, he's only using it every few years. It's probably just as easy to wrap that into the
Yeah.
regular budget.
Yeah.
Just increase the line items for whatever he would need for those items.
Well, McDonald is okay.
Yep.
You are okay.
Mhm.
If we alert Chief Williams, say this is our intention was to ask you to add to your budget what your expected needs are for the coming year. Basically consciously include that in. That would do it for him. We certainly deserve to, he deserves to hear that from us in advance then.
Yeah.
That leaves Tom Bergeron, who has used it and I think has benefited also from the carryover, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Any other impression do we have about the use of that?
Tom's discretionary funds, it's it's a fund of $100,000. In the past, if he has a balance at the end of the year, that doesn't mean we'd appropriate another $100,000 necessarily. We'd only appropriate the balance. Bring it up. Always keep it at $100,000. A couple of years ago, because of budgetary problems, I think we only gave him like $75,000. But we could do that, say beside by a certain date, whatever your balance is, town meeting, and for next year would be that minus, 100, the balance, plus we add to it to bring it up to $100,000.
The impact for him is that if he is underspent for several years, he never accumulates more than 100,000.
Correct.
No.
And my recollection is that he hasn't spent anything in excess of 100,000.
No. I think the only time that happened was last year, the year before, when one of our trucks crapped the bed or something. It wiped it out, basically.
Even then, I think he,
But overall, he's pretty careful what he spends.
well,
My understanding is also that the DPW, when they buy equipment using that account, the equipment is usually over the $5,000 threshold.
Yes.
And so part of the value of that account is that they don't have to predict 18 months in advance what vehicles they might need to repair or replace. And so it gives them more flexibility to not have to go back to town meeting and say, well, we thought we wanted a dump truck, but actually what we need is this other thing more. So that one feels like it's serving its purpose based on what I've gathered.
Yeah, when they first initiated it, I forget how many decades ago. But when we first, that was through capital improvements, the first time we actually did it, which was decades ago, back when Les was still chairman. And that was because the DP, at that time, the current DPW, wasn't Tom at the time. Was it Tom? Anyway, we were repairing more than we were replacing, and he was at constant big repairs. And that's what the discretionary fund was primarily used for. It's like, we need to fix something that's broke, because we need it now. And then it's kind of morphed into this equipment and repair fund, which has worked out really good for Tom. Because and he does a good job. I've never had a concern with that.
or perhaps with him as well as with the police, as the repair or replacement occurs, gradually getting the fleet up to a better.
Well, I think with Tom, we're at a scheduled replacement cycle, which he's pretty much nailed down.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty good with that. At least that's what we're seeing in capital
Yeah.
improvement.
I think he's laid out the next 5 years or something, what we
Yeah.
need, basically.
Richard, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. Just echoing what Jen and Greg were saying, that it's this account, well, just speaking to Public Works, DPW, that this account seems to be functioning, that we don't have any large questions about how it's being utilized, managed. We understand its origin and how it's being utilized. I also see that sewer and info are going to be going away, those discretionary counts, and I just wondered, in the interest of conservation, whether, is 100 grand the right number? Is it 80 grand? Is it 75? What's the? Is it
100 is the cap. So if he doesn't spend it down, we just fill that 100,000 cap, and if he doesn't spend it all to 100,000 a year.
So if we're not doing as many repairs and we're on schedule,
Right.
With our fleet purchases, can we anticipate using this discretionary fund even less?
Yes.
And what we do, if there's a balance in there, we only appropriate up to the $100,000 level. So it doesn't always mean you appropriate $100,000 a year.
That cap is a protection in a sense. For the years when they don't use a lot. They simply don't appropriate it as much next year, and so this is not a case of a fund that grows and grows. 100,000 seems to have its needs.
Yeah.
Well, the,
Did that answer your question?
Well, I was asking whether we thought it should be that number or a smaller number, but it
100
seems that people
Yeah.
like the 100 number.
Well, it's just, there's enough of a buffer in there that big unexpected things, like if he loses a transmission in one of the larger loaders or something like that, you've got to go out and spend $60,000 to put this thing up in a lift and put in a transmission and everything else. There's enough of a fund in there to do it without having to come back. So it gives them a lot of flexibility, and like, I don't think that we ever will need to appropriate more than that, and I don't think cutting it less or looking at the function of doing less, because when he doesn't spend it, we give him less. So it's just kind of a natural function with him. He's been pretty good with it.
Is it worth asking him?
Sure, we do it every year.
Could you live with less?
Yes, we do it every year.
We have given them less.
There's been a few
We
years.
have given them less.
But
There's
it
a-
still has ended up with 100,000.
No,
No.
there's years that we've actually, there was
Cut it.
other capital improvements things that we wanted to make sure that there was enough money to be spread around, and we said,
I think
can
one
you live
year.
with 75 this year, because I'd like to use this 25.
That's what I was thinking too. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
that,
yeah.
We have,
it's only been a couple of years.
Adjusted
that
it.
was back up to 100, because they used to be asked for 100, we gave them 75.
Yeah.
Well, there's still lots of needs out there, and we're talking about
Every
Board
year
of
they
Health.
come.
Board of Health is still coming around, so, and possibly other staffing issues. So,
Yeah.
it's new money.
Yep.
So, just was wondering.
Yeah,
That's worth asking, though.
and we do every year.
I think for the action we ought to take then is, we should, tell these two guys, Chris Williams and Tom Bergeron, that we are endorsing the reserve fund, or sorry, the discretionary fund in the future, but we are going to continue to pay attention.
I thought you had said you
No,
asked.
I-
That impression, actually.
No, I think it was, we were gonna ask Chief Williams if it was all right to roll his stuff into the budget, because he doesn't utilize it as frequently as he should, as it really seems necessary, and that we would maintain Tom's, but ask the
You're
chief, ask the chief if he would roll it into his budget this year, in the coming year.
in coming year.
And we end up with one
Yes.
discretionary
One
fund.
discretionary.
Only one.
And, I would like to give the chief the opportunity to
Mhm.
come back to us and say, I'm not comfortable with that, here's my counter
Mhm.
proposal, here's
Okay.
why. But I think that, I feel comfortable with the action being to tell him that we're inclined to have him see if he
Mhm.
can budget for equipment.
I mean, if he has equipment and he knows how he's been using it over the last 4 or 5 years, he can almost project what he needs.
Yeah, but we'll give him the opportunity to.
You can always come back
Yep.
if
We'll give him the
something
opportunity
happens
to
that he
talk about it.
needed.
Yep. Okay.
So we end up with one letter. Chief Williams. Okay.
I guess it would be a good idea for us to actually vote on this. I'd like to have someone generate a motion here, what our intention is.
I'll move that we accept the one discretionary fund from the DPW, and that we look to eliminate the WPCF fund and the IT discretionary funds for 2021.
Yeah, yes.
And that we allow Chief Williams to come before the board and discuss his discretionary account.
Second?
Second? Any further discussion? Everybody's in favor, say aye.
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 Very good.
It's doing business. There you go.
Like I said,
Let's
Good
do it.
job.
Next thing is reorganization. In the past, this has been fairly routine,
but this year it's gonna be different. We have two major changes. One of them is, the minutes will no longer be prepared by Carolyn. She has been doing that, she said, for at least 10 years.
Wow.
And it's, for other committees, it tends to be a committee member that does it. And that's true for the Energy Committee. And I think it's reasonable that we give her a break, or not just a break, let her off the hook in a sense. Which means that we need a secretary with a little more substance in the job. And
Is
the
it-
other, yes, sir.
Along with that idea, is it even feasible to hire a clerk to take minutes?
Sorry.
You've got a budget of $980 or something like that. I don't really think you've got the money in the budget for that.
Like Minnie Mouse?
Your question was, do we have?
Would it be advisable to hire somebody to take minutes for us, who's a professional at it?
We wouldn't get them, yeah, we don't.
Or is it something we should think about for next year?
They are pretty important minutes, and there are other boards that listen to it.
I think the only one that does is the select board.
Not in Montague, but in
Oh, okay, yeah.
in the region.
Yeah.
One advantage we've had for some time is that the minutes are well prepared and they're quite prompt.
Mhm.
And I think we benefit from that.
A lot.
If we have the same standards for whoever prepares them, whether they're paid or are board members, would be a good thing to maintain. Anyway, that's one eye opener.
That's huge.
When is your last day of note taking? Just curious.
It was gonna be tonight, but obviously I'll work with you, you know.
Okay, all right.
What we can say is, we can accept your resignation or whatever it is, and then it's up to us to cope with it.
Yep.
Short-term or long-term as we
Yep.
see fit.
Yep,
And I will say parenthetically, this will be something of an eye-opener for us to have to do this.
Well, it's not only that, it's the information she brings from the office.
Well, I didn't say I'm not, I mean, at this point, I'm still planning on attending the meetings.
Oh,
At
okay,
this point, I'm
okay,
gonna try and
gotcha,
wean into that too, but at this point, I'm
gotcha.
not gonna leave you high and dry entirely.
Yeah, it's, for how many years you've got my back here, I mean, it's just, it's not gonna be the same.
That would be a serious loss.
Yeah.
Note taking, we can cope with
The line of knowledge, it would be harder to deal with.
Well, in my, just to stay on this particular position, I agree that the notes are very important for the finance committee. I mean, it's pretty high level. CIC, we get away with our notes, but this is pretty high level stuff.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with payrolls, and budgets, and everything else. So we need to take a look at this, see what it would cost to have somebody that would possibly do this professionally for this, and looking at our budget for that. In the interim, we will have to have somebody that's, or a few people that can take turns at working through this.
The Energy Committee attempts to rotate this. Other committees may, I'm not sure whether they have one person that tends to do it or not.
Yeah, no,
I know it's been talked about before, but I don't think much has ever been done about it. Even some of the other committees have somebody who would take notes for them, so they're professional and what have you.
What we,
Better do now is accept the responsibility to pick somebody on an interim basis, or to say we will rotate it until further notice. Is there a preference people have?
You said that there were two big changes coming, so maybe you should talk about what the other one is, so we have a full.
The other change is I'm not going to be the chair anymore.
Jesus.
And,
Jen?
In a pallid way in the past, I've said, gee, somebody else can do it if they want, and it didn't get as far as it really would have to in order to make a good switch, but and enough things have happened in the last year in my life, partly my health, partly my discontent, I guess, with the way I've done some things here, and it's time for somebody else to take this on. And I'm staying on the committee, and I intend to be a regular and vigorous participant and so forth, but I'm not going to be the chair anymore.
Yeah.
Have we had anybody that's come forth who would like to join the committee?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I've made a couple of calls to people that have been mentioned in the past as candidates, and they've usually said, no, I don't really, this isn't really the right time for me, or gee, I'm not very financial. And I go back and I ask them the same question again. I said, you don't have to be a financial whiz.
I think what the hard part about this committee is from October until almost May, it's weekly. It's not, once a month like the planning board or some other committee. It's weekly, every week for 2 or 3 months, okay? And that's a lot of time consuming for people who have other jobs or other activities, what have you. So it's trying to find somebody who can give that time. It's hard.
I find that in talking with recruits, they have a high image of high quality, and I think we deliver high quality, but it's not unattainable by other people. And we certainly have brought on a variety of people, a variety of backgrounds. In the 12 years I've been doing this, so I think it's not as awesome.
Have we-
Intimidating
I don't
as they
think the word is out in the world
Yes.
as widely as it could be that there is a vacancy on the finance.
Can we
committee.
put a thing on the website, looking for a vacancy?
And so I think that, we can just, there's already a pretty nice description on the website about what the finance committee is, I think, and what is involved in serving on the finance committee. I haven't looked at it in a while, but, a letter to the newspaper, some kind of, posting on the website. Like, there's a few things that we could do besides the word of mouth to people that we know. I do think it is a big commitment, like Fred said. And so I wouldn't want somebody to jump on because it sounded good without kind of knowing what they were getting into. I found it very useful to come and observe some meetings before I joined. And I would encourage anybody who's interested to do that, unless they already feel like they know what is involved. But I think there are lots of people out there who might be great additions to this committee.
Mhm.
I don't think that, I think it's gonna work out.
We are not rocket scientists. We are trying to take a town-wide view of things and having the long-term perspective. We do have some demands. We are not just a react when something happens. We are a planning and forecasting kind of committee.
One thing that I have learned from some other committees that I've served on is that it isn't good practice to have somebody who's new to the committee be the person who takes the notes or be the chair. So those decisions that we have to make tonight are really about the five of us. I think we aren't waiting to see who the new committee members
Oh,
are.
no, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you on that.
Unless this note-taking chairperson stepped into the room who was really awesome. But
That's right.
until that person shows up.
So I would be willing to try being the chair if you would support that. I feel like I do not have the depth of knowledge about finances or town business that John has, but John's still gonna be on the committee, and you all are gonna still be on the committee. What I do have is some experience running meetings and helping groups make decisions together. And, you know, with your support and perhaps with somebody who was willing to be the vice chair so that if I wasn't able to be here, somebody else could step in, I would be willing to give it a try.
Good.
We're very grateful for that.
I'd like to know if Greg or Fred, if either of you had thought about being chair.
Been asked, I mean, I've been chairs, yeah, so, I travel quite a bit, back and forth, and so I wouldn't be the best chair. Because, you know, there's times, in October, February, that I'm gone for a month. So, you know, I'd always be the vice chair, and it's better to have someone who doesn't have an extensive travel. I'm happy to be second, if that's what you need. But again, I don't think, every year that I come back to the finance committee, I go, this is my last year, I'm not gonna re-up. And every year I do that, somebody else leaves. And this year, it's like been a bloodbath. So I'm gonna stay on for another, I think my term ends maybe next year. So, what's that?
I think mine is upcoming too.
Yeah,
You get to
so,
a point, you get to a certain age, you wanna,
yeah, but
Like, look at
I'm not gonna be
your
less,
exit strategy.
was 90-some years old.
yeah,
still,
I've been
it's the
sitting
IC.
I've been sitting on town boards since 1994.
I'm trying to sit back and say, okay, when did I join the planning board? I've been in town like 13 years, and it was only maybe the second year I was in town, I joined the planning board.
Hutch Hammond.
Then I joined this board,
Sorry,
Remember Hutch
and I
Hammond?
joined another one.
remember the name,
No,
I
that
don't know if
sounds
it's
good.
actually working here at the
You
time.
were-
I like the idea
I
of
can't
Jen
see
because
her.
you have ability to take notes and write
Been
things
doing the Hutch Hammond
that
years.
I don't have, and it's just,
So can we rotate the responsibility of the note-taking or the minutes-taking for the time being? I don't,
For the time being, I do think we should seriously explore the
Yes.
possibility of having somebody who's not on the committee take the notes and having it be somebody who's really knows what they're doing in terms of what we legally have to.
do you know what other towns pay their secretary, whatever they want to call it, stenos?
I think it varies. I know more about people who take school committee minutes, and I can ask a couple of them.
I can also ask, or check, because I can't remember off the top of my head, how much we pay the woman that does the minutes for the select board minutes, but I could check into that and see how much it is and if she'd be interested in taking on.
Wendy takes the select board minutes, doesn't
She
she?
doesn't.
She doesn't anymore?
No, she hasn't done the minutes in a while.
Well, really?
She's
Okay.
at the meeting and she tells that the minutes are done by actually someone that lives in North Carolina.
Okay, okay.
oh, they send the transcripts.
Yeah, it's done by tape, basically, she gets the tapes and.
Yeah, that'd be great. if we could
I
find
would
out.
hope we could get it done closer to home. That-
Even just to get, I think the first step is to figure out what's the range of costs. for such a thing.
Because you're talking, you're almost talking $60, $70 a meeting.
Don't know.
I don't know.
It does have to be, because.
It could be a flat, it could be a flat rate too, you know.
Just horrible.
If
People here can see what is done in other places.
Yeah.
Jen, and if Carolyn can see what other alternatives there are.
that'd be a good thing to have.
I think one thing we don't do here is, if you want to start or not, have it on that, but we don't record our meetings. We use the TV recording, right?
We could make our own recording, you're saying.
Like at the planning board meeting,
Yeah, we used
we
to.
tape the meetings every time we have one.
We used to record them for finance committee meetings.
Used to.
Didn't we used to record the finance committee meetings?
Yes, we did, and then I just
Yeah.
stopped because since
Yeah.
it's on there, it was just as easy to,
Yeah.
Redundant.
that and someone borrowed my recorder and never returned it.
If this conversation is still open,
Yeah.
I'd like to say that I support any one of us being chairperson, including you, Jen, but I'm also happy to step into that role too. So I understand, and my interest, I think, it would be in running efficient meetings. And I thought one of the interesting questions that came up recently was whether or not the select board needed to always attend. And just how we serve the select board. So kind of making sure, whether they're in the room or not, how, because they have a big job, making sure that we're having efficient meetings and that we're helping them do their work as best as
Basically,
possible.
we're advisory committee.
They started attending our meetings some time ago when we're trying to avoid having department heads make their budget pitch to two different organizations. And it may be time to reevaluate whether
I mean, you could leave it open for them attending a meeting, but maybe they don't have to attend every meeting. You know.
Or is there a way for us to poll their, or to, some direction from them as we go about our process? So
I
that,
think the way to do that would be to have them give direction to Steve, and for Steve to then relay that to you at your meeting.
Yeah.
so that we're helping them answer questions that they have, because they're making the ultimate decisions.
Well, I support Jen as chair. We'd have to find a vice chair, obviously. You want to send in the vice chair? Not every day.
yeah, I could do that.
You could do that? That way you have a second.
There's some transition available.
Yep, yeah, sure.
That's,
And then we can always reorganize later, but I'm comfortable with that structure.
Good, sounds good.
Yep.
I think it'd be helpful for you too. I mean,
Okay, we have a slate has been developed. It would be, which we vote on now, would be Jen as the chair, and me as the vice chair. The secretary
is rotating at the moment until something better comes along.
Which will be fairly quickly. Before July 24th. Yeah, okay.
and just a sec, one more thing here.
We should probably pick now who the first secretary is gonna be for the 24th. So we've got a plan in place until something happens.
You already raised your hand once.
Just to clarify, it will have to be someone who's gonna be here on the 24th of July, just in case that becomes an issue.
That's kind of important.
Is anyone not gonna be here on the 24th?
No? Plan on being here the 24th. Because we have a CIC meeting that afternoon also.
We have one that day?
Yep.
Well,
I did read it, but
you
keep looking at it.
One to be the one?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that the finance committee reorganize with Jen Aubrey as chairman, John Handel as vice chair, and who's read your last name? Sorry. Whitmer is the secretary. Richard Whitmer.
Second.
Only for July 24th.
Oh, hopefully July 24th.
The way I've got it is reorganize with Jen Otley as chair, John Handel as vice chair, and rotate the position of clerk until further notice. The first clerk will be Mr. Whitmer.
Yes, that sounds good. Perfect. Thank you.
People are still comfortable with that? Very well, that was a motion. I have a second. I think I had one.
Second?
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Very well, let it be.
Feeling the relief already, John? Feeling the relief already?
Well, it'll take a while. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. It has, John. You've done an excellent job.
How many years have we been?
Well, I've never sat in the audience for town meeting, which tells me that at the time I became a town meeting member, I also became a finance committee member. And I think that was 2004. I'd have to go back and look.
I sat in town meeting, I think 2 or 3 times before I joined this committee.
It's a different perspective down there.
Oh, thanks.
The key.
No idea that it came with a key.
Yep.
That means you're responsible for making sure that the building's locked after we leave.
Now everyone on TV is gonna know too.
No sneaking in at 11 o'clock at night.
You then register with Wendy Bogus that you are the key holder?
I will.
This is like having your stripes torn off your uniform. Well, it's.
There's always a change of command.
It has been a pleasure being,
Well, you
know,
know,
it's-
Pleasure being led by you.
to the extent I've been leader. And
I think what you're doing, John, is good. I think Jen's stepping in is good because some of us are sitting here, 10 years, may not be here, probably one way or the other, and it's time for the young people to step up and learn
Speak for yourself.
and take over.
Well, and I think we have a nice opportunity to have a transition year here too, where, you know, I think I have a lot to learn from you and I'm going to ask lots of questions.
come up with lots of answers.
I'll get you a magic 8 ball. I'll get you a magic 8 ball. With the answers.
I will probably continue to be curious about things that I don't know, and I'll continue to ask questions offline and not get in the way. The next item is updates. Simply, is there anything in the last month roughly that has happened that we ought to know about? Not just the last 48 hours, but things that have come up that people just haven't mentioned. I haven't got anything.
I actually have a few items that relate to our future agenda items, just briefly. One is that I did speak to Mr. Wojcik this evening, and at this point, there's no plan to hire a nurse, a town nurse, so that's off the table at this point.
That's Board of Health, that's.
Yes.
What was that again?
At this point, the Board of Health is not planning on trying to get a nurse position.
Okay.
It's been taken off the table, at least for the time being.
Carolyn, do you happen to know if there's, have a timeline for filling the health inspector position?
That was my next thing. I think I spoke with him briefly, and what I understand is that he's planning on holding off on that until he can determine exactly what's needed, if in fact it's needed. So I think he's going to try to not fill it unless he finds that he absolutely has to. But at this point, at this time, things are going okay.
You referred to a he.
Dan Washuk, I'm sorry, he's the new Director of Health.
His name is what?
Daniel Washik, W-A-S-I-U-K.
UK?
Yes. The other thing is, so I'm assuming that can kind of go off the list for now. And secondly, a little bit of news, and I'm assuming you might want to put this on the agenda for July. The town has settled with First Light, but nothing's been finalized and signed yet. They're expecting that probably before the next meeting. But also Eversource, I guess, has filed an appeal on their values. So perhaps at the next meeting also, Mr. Tonelli can come in and talk about what the impacts of that are and what decisions will need to be made going forward for.
So First Light is the organization we've always been dealing with, because they are the ones that run Northfield Mountain. Now Eversource is a separate entity.
Yes.
Is the owner of the water.
Yeah, but I believe those are specifically the values of the solar array. So it's
Two
like
separate
a
issues,
separate thing, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is the First Light settlement all the years, or is it just 2014?
I believe it was all of the years, but I wouldn't put that in writing. That's my
That would be good.
understanding. But
That would be good.
Well, that would be really interesting to hear about.
Did she have any forecast in when she would be able to come and talk to us?
I got the impression that the 24th might be, if she's available, might be a good time that she would be able to have more information, be able to talk to us. And I'll also probably send out an email in terms of what potential impacts could be and what kinds of decisions that the select board and the finance committee may need to make going forward.
Well, if it's acceptable to you, I would propose that we put her on the agenda for 2 weeks off then.
Absolutely, yeah, if she's available.
Yeah, and I assume you want to ask if Chief Williams could make it that same night, just to,
If, I don't think we need to rush him, but he
Okay.
could come in as early as convenience if he
Okay.
wants to. Often at this point in meetings, actually, there's a kind of request of committee members whether they want to put things on the agenda for the next meeting, and we have this list of things that we said we wanted to talk about. And so, one of the things that I'll work on with John is trying to kind of put them in order and figure out what needs to happen when, with Carolyn's input also. But if there are things that you would like to have on the agenda for the next few meetings, welcome your suggestions.
Can I put a thought in response to that? Can I put a thought in there? Knowing our annual schedule, that as fall starts, we'll begin what is our regular, budget process, which seems, at least the year or two that I've been here, it's pretty regular and pretty, it's a lot of work for everyone, pretty steady. But if you look at the second half of these future agenda items, they all seem to be questions about staffing or emergency preparedness or framework questions, and what I'm now thinking of is like blueprint questions. So it doesn't seem like there's that much time once we're in the budget season to really tackle framework, guideline, blueprint questions. So I really think that the time to do that kind of thinking is really now, like in the summer, early fall, and then it's over. So the way I've been thinking about this, kind of prompted by some reading, is just what we've already have, what we know as these our guidelines, our financial guidelines. But I'm also thinking about the way we historically spend our money as a town and as our financial blueprint. This is the blueprint for Montague. And at the end of town meeting, we came back together 2 meetings ago and said, hey, okay, how was that year? Let's check in. What did we do right? What can we do better? I just thought that another way to ask that question is, hey, let's look at our blueprint. How did we do? how close are we to our blueprint? So, I wasn't part of making that, that blueprint was in place when I got here. I guess that's the nature of a blueprint, right? You make that first and then you stick to it. But I wonder about sometime in the next couple of months, or several times within the next couple of months, us seeing what are the important pieces of this, what the select board thinks are the important pieces of this, which things do they think do we need to think about staffing for Board of Health? Do we need to think about staffing for other offices in the building, rather than being hit one at a time? Does Town Hall need to rethink how it's staffed? These questions, I guess, if we don't step out of the process that's always the same, to reflect on it and say, I guess this is the time to do that. So I'm saying that I'm wanting to do that aggressively over the next couple of months with input. Basically, I'm suggesting that we take our ideas, hey, these are blueprint issues, questions we have, get those to the select board and say, hey, do these questions match up with what your priorities are? What do you want to know more about any of these? And if there are a real issue or two that they want to know about, then instead of us being a group of people with a lot of diverse experience kind of softly talking around really important issues, we then say, hey, this is the one that we think we want to affect, we want to impact. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I think one subject that,
Wanting to have just some action on that up front so that we don't lose it later.
where this town really hasn't taken much action, as far as I know, is this new regionalization idea.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make that.
And I think
Who was it, Fred?
regionalization of Pioneer, which I think is still several years away. They're in deep financial problems, and we're not gonna, and I don't think this town's even appointed a committee yet. We're waiting. So I think Gil is waiting. And my fear is that some of these other towns are gonna look at it more as a financial thing, and not just an financial and educational. And that's the bad part, is that we're saving money, they won't reallocate that money to education. So I think it's something we have to be aware of, and probably the other committees we're on, that you'll hear more about it. But I think it's 5-6 years away.
So on the blueprint thing, I agree with you. It's kind of a different direction for the finance committee, because generally we follow the budgetary, and we totally agree with what you're saying. So for a future meeting that we kind of put that on the agenda, if you could have kind of an outline you could share with us what you think that would look like, what the discussion, how the discussion would start. And what are we looking at? Is this a value? What do we think is what do we think is important for Montague, and how are we going to support that as a finance committee type of thing? If that's what the blueprint's kind of design is going to be.
Yes.
Then kind of lay that out so we can look at it, because we're talking about kind of making a value statement. We're going to be saying we think these things are important for our community, and we want to see funding kind of
Support those
guide-
ideas.
Yeah, possibly. So if you could outline something like that before a meeting we do with that. it'd be
Another
great.
thing that could be put on here, I don't think there's a lot of solar going up in town, okay? We receive taxes from it. Hopefully, these solar programs, projects will go beyond the 25 years, but what if they don't?
No, it's all one-time funding.
So
I
what
can
if
tell you
they,
they're not going to last forever.
and what I'm saying is that your generation and yours, 20 years from now, or 25 years, are you gonna be looking at a huge shortfall in taxes?
That's
So
not the
Fred,
way it
is that
works.
something that you wanna talk about
I think it's
soon,
something,
or is it something that you want us to?
Because we're not
sort of
using
have
it
I
for-
think
we're
it's
not
something
using-
that
Keep
over
in mind.
the next few years, that the finance committee and the town need to
Yeah.
be concerned
I
about.
don't think that's an issue. If you're talking about the payments to the town from Kearsarge, they're already being allocated
No,
separately.
I'm not
But if
talking-
you're, but if you're talking about the actual tax revenue, if those valuations go away, that doesn't affect the tax levy. That money just gets redistributed and it comes from everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the valuations, I mean, there may be some decreases in whatever, but it doesn't affect the levy limit, it just affects who pays how
Right.
much.
Okay.
So there's not gonna be a major shortfall if, well, the total thing goes down, it just means that other people are going, their taxes will go up more.
So Richard, back to your point, would you be willing to come to the next meeting ready to start that conversation? We'll set aside, maybe 20 minutes on the agenda to get it started and then come back to it.
Does that sound?
Yeah,
Does
sounds
the group welcome that?
You
Great.
can lead that part if you're comfortable with that.
Thank you, Jen. Good. I'll prepare that.
On the sheet in the back, one of the items, the next step in Board of Health reorganization, we know that one's no longer
Yep.
an issue. What impact a combination with Pioneer or Tech School might have, that was simply on there to make sure that it was on our minds. That's it. Basically, stay aware of what's happening, but nothing
Nothing's gonna happen.
nothing from us yet. The proposal of the select board, creation of human resources or facilities management, this is something that would be part of this blueprint. These are things that we have been thinking about, select board, what do you have in mind? Let's see, what other things did we talk about? We talked about the ATB case. The others are generally out in the future.
Yeah, the only other one that I don't wanna put it on the agenda for next time, cause I think we're good for next time, but soon, I wanna try to figure out a structure for, reflecting on the affordable assessment for the school district, cause it's been 10 years since we developed that formula. Some things have changed, and I think each year we've had a time in our deliberations where we've said, are we gonna stick to the agreement that we have, or are we gonna change it? And I'd like to, either reaffirm or rethink that position. Like, I'd like to be able for us to explain why we wanna stay with it, rather than just saying what I think we said last year, which is,
I think the big
this is what
question,
we've been doing, so we're gonna keep doing it.
question is, this is a deeper question, is are we putting enough money into education into town?
Or too much.
No, it's not too much, but it's a big picture, it's not a simple answer to it.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think is worth a deeper discussion this year, even if we end up deciding that we wanna stay with the compact that we made. So I'm giving you a heads up that I'm gonna try to make that happen. And then at our last meeting, we talked with Steve Ellis about our desire to see a kind of timeline of projects that have been funded through capital improvements and other kinds of big things that seem like they might be coming down the pipeline. And so I will check in with him to see how he'd like to report back to us about that and when we might expect that.
Let's see. Any other suggestions? We have meetings tentatively set for the 24th of July, 21st of August, and the 11th of September. September 11th would be the beginning of the regular weekly meetings if we decide to. It's not to say that there's nothing after September 11th, but it gets to be
Can I,
planned. Yes?
when are the narratives supposed to get in? And I know we had
They were-
talked about having them come in early this year instead of later.
That's the Steve Ellis question.
Was this
Yeah, we-
mid-September?
No dates, I think, were ever discussed for that. I know that already Steve and I have talked about having the budgets in their entirety come in earlier than they have in the past, but I don't think we've addressed specifics about the
Okay.
for each
it is true that we have talked in an earlier meeting about staggering some of the inputs that we get and having some of them earlier, so that they get,
Well, that's,
that this would.
CI committee would like that, especially, if, you know, the bigger projects, that we have more time to evaluate them and talk about them than being pushed, you know, making a decision.
Okay.
Anything in the 48-hour?
Hit that.
Yep, we pretty much hit that.
Failing anything,
Motion to adjourn?
there's a motion, second.
Second.
Any discussion, anything we're missing? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let it be.
Congratulations, girl.
Thanks.
To pass and pass next year.